Rain smeared the windows of Mercy Bridge Medical Center, turning the city outside into streaks of gray and red. Inside the emergency department, the lights were too bright, the air too cold, the smell of antiseptic wrapped around everything. A monitor beeped somewhere in a steady rhythm, the only thing in the room that seemed sure of itself. Riley Monroe snapped a pair of gloves over her hands. The latex made a small, sharp sound as it sealed at her wrists. Someone had left a cup of coffee on the counter. It had gone cold hours ago, a thin skin forming on the surface. The ambulance doors burst open. A gurney rolled in, fast wheels rattling over the threshold. Paramedics shouted vitals as they pushed their voices, overlapping with the hiss of oxygen and the distant wail of another siren arriving somewhere behind them. Male, early 20s, stab wound to the abdomen, one paramedic called. Lost a lot of blood on scene, pressure dropping, heart rate all over the place. The young man on the gurney was pale under the fluorescent lights, lips already turning a faint blue. One hand still clutched the front of his torn hoodie, as if he could hold himself together that way. A resident doctor hurried in, eyes wide, hair flattened with sweat. "Get the transfusion going. Where's the pump?" "It is not responding," a nurse answered, slapping the side of the machine. "Lines keep occluding." The room thickened with noise. Gloves snapped, metal trays clinked, someone cursed under their breath. The resident fumbled with a disconnected tube. Blood was pooling in the sheets, dark and slick, drip by drip, sliding toward the floor. Riley stepped closer, the sounds fading a little around her. She watched the monitor for a breath, watched the heart rate dip, then stagger. The resident's hands shook around the tubing. "Everyone back," Riley said, not loud but clear. "Give me 30 seconds. People hesitated. She did not repeat herself. She reached for a pair of clamps and pinched the leaking line, then clamped another vessel higher up where the blood spurted bright. The patient jerked when she pressed hard into the wound with gauze. "We do not have time for the pump," she said. "Manual pressure. Squeeze that bag. Tighter." A nurse obeyed, squeezing the IV bag in a steady rhythm. Riley kept her fingers where they needed to be, feeling for the subtle change in resistance under the gauze, counting silently with the beeps of the monitor. The resident tried to reclaim control. "Should we intubate first or call surgery again, or—" "Quiet," Riley said. "Listen to his heart." For a moment they did. The monitor stuttered, the line dipped. Then slowly the peaks began to rise again, small and weak, but there. Color crept back into the young man's face, just a shade enough to tell her he was not gone yet. "Good," she murmured. "Keep that pressure steady, get blood from the trauma fridge, and clean up that mess before someone slips." Breath returned to the room. Nurses moved with purpose again. The resident nodded too quickly, grateful to be told what to do. Someone muttered, half joking, half in awe. "Since when does Monroe move faster than the doctors?" Riley peeled off her gloves. Her hands underneath were dry but faintly reddened at the knuckles, a line of older scars pale against her skin. She walked out of the trauma bay, past the glass where the boy's mother stood pressed to the window, both palms flat against it, as if she could reach through. In the hallway away from the bright lights, Riley let her back find the wall. She closed her eyes for a second. The echo of the monitor still rang in her head, that thin, anxious beep. Her fingers curled against her scrub pants, then relaxed. "Monroe," a voice called from the nurse's station. "You good?" She opened her eyes. "Yeah, he is holding right?" "For now," the charge nurse replied. "You saved his ass." Riley gave a small shrug. "We will see." The automatic doors at the entrance slid open again. This time, no gurney rushed in. The sound that followed was different from the ambulance sirens outside. Shoes on tile, measured and heavy. A cluster of men and women in dark suits stepped inside, shoulders damp with rain IDs clipped to their jackets. The ER slowed. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. A nurse killed the sound on a television that had been playing a game show for background noise. The air changed as if someone had opened a window to winter. The man in front held up a badge. Even from across the room, Riley could read the letters. FBI. "I am Special Agent Carter Morales," he said, his voice carried without needing to shout. "We are looking for Captain Monroe." Silence spread in a quick wave. Someone at the desk let out a short laugh, confused. "Captain who? We do not have captains down here, just nurses and doctors." Morales let his gaze sweep the room. He had the tired eyes of someone who had spent too many years reading reports at 3 a.m. His stare moved past the residents, past the techs, past the man in scrubs who clearly wanted to look important. It settled on Riley. She stood a little apart from the others, still by the wall, a faint line of dried blood on her sleeve where the cuff had ridden up. Her ID badge read, R. Monroe, RN, in neat block letters, nothing more. Morales studied her face, then lifted his chin. "Then that is her," he said. Heads turned. The charge nurse blinked. That is Riley. She's just a nurse." Riley did not move. The only thing that shifted was her hand fingers tightening once around the edge of the counter beside her. Her heartbeat picked up enough for her to feel it in her throat, but her voice stayed level. "You must be in the wrong wing," she said. "This is the emergency department." Morales approached at a steady pace. He did not crowd her, but he did not leave much space either. Up close, she could see the reins still clinging to the shoulders of his suit, tiny droplets caught in the fabric. "Riley Monroe," he said. "United States Navy Special Operations Medical Group." Her jaw clenched. There was the smallest pause before she answered. "I am a nurse here," she said. "That is all." Behind them someone whispered Navy. Someone else said Special Ops. The words rippled through the staff, thin and sharp. Morales kept his eyes on her. "Maybe that is what your badge says now. It is not what your file says." For a second, the lights overhead flickered just a tiny tremor in the brightness that only the people watching closely would notice. Riley glanced up, then back at him. The charge nurse cleared her throat, stepping forward. "Is she in some kind of trouble?" Morales shook his head once. "No, this is not that kind of visit." His gaze did not leave Riley's. "We need to talk, Captain." Her fingers loosened their grip on the counter. She straightened shoulders, squaring almost by reflex, an old habit returning before she could stop it. The title hung in the air between them, heavier than any badge. Riley nodded once. "Where?" she asked. Morales gestured toward the corridor that led to the administrative offices. "Somewhere private." She took a last look at the ER. The boy in the trauma bay was still alive, monitors blinking. Her colleagues stared back at her with a mix of curiosity and something like suspicion. She could feel their questions rising unanswered. Then she turned and walked beside Morales, her footsteps echoing down the hallway away from the bright lights into the quieter part of the hospital, where the walls did not smell like bleach and fear. She kept her hands at her sides as she walked, fingers brushing lightly against the fabric of her scrub pants, as if reassuring herself they were still there. Just hands, just a nurse, for the moment. The hallway to the administrative wing was quieter. The fluorescents hummed over their heads softer than in the emergency department, and the smell of bleach faded into something more like old paper and coffee. Morales walked half a step ahead, not speaking. Riley kept her eyes on the floor tiles, counting them to keep her hands from shaking. Left, right. Her sneakers whispered over linoleum that had seen too many night shifts and not enough sunlight. The hospital director met them at the door of his office, tie a little loose hair mussed, as if someone had dragged him out of paperwork. His nameplate read, Alan Carter, M.D., He glanced from Morales to Riley with a confused frown. "Agent Morales, is that right?" he said. "What is going on is one of my staff under investigation." Morales shook his head. "No, sir, we just need a private space to speak with Ms. Monroe." The director stepped aside, still frowning. "You are making my people nervous, Agent." Morales gave a small nod that could have been apology or dismissal. Riley walked in. The office was warm and cramped walls lined with framed certificates and a shelf of medical textbooks that looked as if they had not been opened in years. "Sit, please," the director said. Riley stayed standing. Morales noticed and remained on his feet as well. He set a folder on the desk between them. It was thick, the manila edges worn, the flap closed, with a red string that had been looped and unlooped many times. He untied it with careful fingers. "Captain Riley Monroe," he said, "United States Navy, Special Operations Medical Group, honorable discharge 3 years ago." He did not look at the pages as he spoke. He watched her. The words felt like someone had opened a window on a winter morning and let the cold flood in. Riley kept her face still. "You have the wrong Monroe," she said. "I registered here as a nurse. That is all on my file." Morales turned a page. The paper rustled in the quiet room. "You changed your address twice in the last 3 years," he went on. "Changed your phone number, cut contact with everyone from your former unit. You vanished as far as the Navy was concerned, at least on paper." The director stared between them. "Former unit Navy Riley, is that true?" She did not answer him. Her eyes were on the folder now. A photograph lay on top of the stack. She could see the corner of it from where she stood. A group in desert uniforms, dust on their boots, a runway behind them. One woman in the center, younger jaw, tied a sunburn line across her throat. Morales slid the photo aside, revealing a report stamped with thick black lines where sentences had been redacted. "The Redwater Airfield blast, vous savez," he said. 6 dead, several wounded. You were the senior medical officer on site. Riley felt her fingers curl against her palm. The room seemed to tilt for a heartbeat. "I was a medic," she said, "not a miracle worker." Morales nodded once. "No one is asking for miracles." The director found his voice again. "Agent, I do not understand what this has to do with tonight. This is an emergency department, not a recruitment office." Morales opened another sheet, this one newer, the paper still crisp. "The patient Ms. Monroe just worked on is not our concern. He said, He said. The man currently in intensive care is. Stab wound to the flank transported under federal escort. He is a key witness in an ongoing investigation and a protected asset of the United States government. He glanced at Riley. He is also Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reeve, your former commanding officer. The name landed in her chest like a blow. For a moment, she heard only the thud of her own pulse. The office lights buzzed overhead. You are mistaken, she said, though she knew he was not. Morales shook his head. He was attacked an hour out from this facility. Lost a lot of blood. He has been in and out of consciousness since he arrived. The surgical team patched the obvious damage, but there is a complication. He closed the folder, leaving the details between the covers invisible and heavy. Before he went under, he said one thing that was not about the man who stabbed him, Morales said quietly. He said, and I quote, "Find Monroe, only she knows where it hurts." Riley swallowed. Her throat felt dry. The director looked at her, eyes wide. You know this man? She nodded once. I did. Then you should go see him, he said. If it helps his recovery, if he is some kind of asset for them, we need him alive. Morales did not move. There is more. The surgeons found old shrapnel near his spine. They think it is from Redwater. It has shifted. There is internal bleeding. They are nervous about going in blind. Riley shut her eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw heat waves rising off a runway sand in the air, smoke rising in a black column. Redwater, she said under her breath. Morales nodded. He carries your last mission with him, literally. She opened her eyes. The director was watching her as if seeing someone different standing in the same spot. Why did you leave the Navy, Riley? He asked. She managed a bitter half-smile. Bad fit? Morales spoke before he could press further. She left after she made a call under fire that cost lives. Saved some, too. Riley said the words out before she could hold them back. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Morales picked up the folder, tucking the photograph back inside. We can walk you through the details in ICU. It will be easier to explain if you are looking at him. He opened the door and waited. Riley stood still for a beat, then followed him out. The intensive care unit was colder. Machines lined the walls of each glass-enclosed room, a forest of metal and plastic and light. Most of the patients lay very still. Nurses moved quietly, eyes on screens. Reeve was in the third room on the left. His chart hung at the door. The name confirmed it. Daniel J. Reeve, age 47. Riley stared at the letters until they blurred. Morales watched her face. Is this some kind of joke? She asked. No, he said. We do not design jokes like this. They stepped inside. Reeve lay on his side, supported by pillows. An oxygen cannula sat under his nose. Bandages swaddled his flank and wrapped part of his lower back. The monitor beside him showed a heart rate that was steady but not strong. There were more lines built into the muscles of his face now. His hair had gone grayer at the temples. Even with his eyes closed, he looked like a man who was not used to lying still. A critical care doctor approached them, tablet in hand. You must be the nurse everyone is whispering about. Riley did not take her eyes off Reeve. Just show me the scans. The doctor turned the tablet around. The image glowed in pale color. A cluster of bright fragments near the spine, like a small metal constellation, lodged where it absolutely did not belong. Old shrapnel, the doctor said. It has been there a while, we guess from some blast injury. One piece shifted when he got stabbed. It is nicking a vessel. We have microbleeding. Why have you not taken it out? She asked. The doctor shrugged uneasy. Look where it sits. Too close to everything important. We do not have a map for what scar tissue is doing in there. You tug the wrong way, he never walks again, or worse. Reeve stirred on the bed. His eyelids flickered. For a second, his gaze found Riley in the haze of medication and pain. Monroe, he whispered. Her hands opened and closed at her sides. Sir? His fingers twitched weakly on the sheet, reaching for something that was not there. The doctor moved to adjust his oxygen. Reeve's voice rasped. Not them, he murmured. You, only you. His eyes slid closed again, but the faint line between his brows stayed as if the thought did not want to let go. The doctor looked at her. He has been repeating that you know. Only Monroe. It is not exactly helpful, but here we are. Helpful, Riley echoed. Her heart thudded in her chest. Her palms felt damp inside her gloves. Morales took a half-step closer so only she could hear. You know where that shrapnel is from. You were there when it went in. You might be the only person who can guess how it is sitting now. Riley watched the slow rise and fall of Reeve's chest, the hiss of oxygen, the tick of the monitor. I am a nurse, she said. Morales did not flinch. You are also a combat medic who kept men alive in worse places than this. She jerked her gaze away from the bed toward the glass. On the other side, the ICU hallway glowed white reflections of lights running up and down. In worse places I lost people, she said. Morales did not argue. The doctor cleared his throat. He needs an operation, doctor, you think? Yeah, an operation, the doctor said. Soon. We are setting up a meeting with neurosurgery, vascular, you name it, but they are all going to say the same thing. It is a minefield in there. We keep hoping the bleeding slows. It has not. Riley swallowed again. Her tongue tasted like metal. Get your team together, she said. Make your plans. Put all your smartest people in a room. The doctor nodded, relieved. You will assist. She shook her head. I will not be in that room. Both men stared at her. Morales frowned. You heard him. He asked for you. I heard him, she said. Her voice was steady, even if her hands were not. But I do not cut anymore. She turned away from the bed, the monitor, the familiar pattern of lines that could still pull at her like a rope. Her fingers brushed the fabric of her scrub pants again, searching unconsciously for something in her pocket that was not there. I'm sorry, she said. Then she walked out of the room. The glass door sighing closed behind her, the reflection catching her for a moment in the pane, as if a different woman were walking beside her, one in a uniform she no longer wore. The locker room was almost empty. Someone had left a radio on low in the corner, a faint wash of music under the buzz of the lights. The air smelled like detergent and the ghost of sweat. Riley pulled open her locker. The metal door creaked a little, a sound she knew as well as the hiss of an oxygen line. Her spare scrubs were folded on the top shelf. Her lunchbox sat abandoned on the bottom, untouched. As she reached for a fresh pair of gloves, something shifted and slid forward. A small canvas bag, old and faded, bumped against the metal lip of the shelf and dropped into her hands. She stared at it. She had forgotten it was there, or maybe she had just trained herself not to see it. Her fingers worked the zipper open. Inside, a round piece of metal caught the fluorescent light. A challenge coin, its edges worn smooth, the insignia of her old unit pressed into its face. Next to it lay a folded photograph and a strip of cloth stiff with dried brown stains that had once been bright. She placed the coin in her palm. It was heavier than she remembered. The metal was cool against her skin. The photograph showed 9 people in desert camouflage, wind whipping at their sleeves. A runway stretched out behind them, a plane in the distance, heat shimmer blurring the horizon. The woman in the middle stood with her arms crossed, a headset around her, neck dust on her boots. Riley barely recognized her own face. She looked younger, but there was something hard set in her eyes even then. The strip of cloth had been torn from a uniform shirt. There was a name printed in faded ink. She did not need to read it. The letters were already written somewhere behind her ribs. The locker room fell away. Redwater came back in pieces at first. The smell of jet fuel and burned metal, the taste of grit between her teeth. Then the blast, the way the world jumped sideways, sound ripped out of her ears and replaced with an endless high ring. She saw the runway again, smoke boiling into the sky, sand and debris raining down, bodies on the tarmac, some moving, some not. Her own voice younger and hoarser in her memory. Triage. Now. Walk and talk to the hangar. If you can walk, you are green. If you cannot, I am coming. Hands on wounds, one after another. Tourniquets, chest seals, morphine. Blood soaked through her sleeves, hot and slippery. Someone screamed for a mother in a language she did not understand. Someone else laughed in the way people laugh when they are too scared to cry. The radio on her shoulder crackled. Monroe, we have 2 birds incoming. We can lift 9, repeat 9. She looked around. There were 12. She remembered Reeve then half-pinned under a twisted frame of metal near the edge of the blast site, teeth gritted, telling her to leave him and take the others. She remembered the way his hand had gripped her wrist when she tried to pull him free, the impossible weight of the wreckage. That is an order, Captain Quijote. He had said, sweat and soot running into his eyes. Get them out. Come back if you can. She had wanted to argue. There was no time. The helicopter rotors had grown louder. She had pointed to 6 of the worst wounded who still had a chance. You, up, now. 2 more had staggered after them. 9 on the bird, 3 left on the ground. The math had been cruel and real. The first helicopter lifted off wind from the blades, blasting sand into her face. She had stayed until the last second hand on the skid, making sure everyone was strapped in. She remembered looking back at Reeves, still trapped, giving her a crooked grin. Do your job, Monroe, he had shouted over the roar. That is all you can do. The helicopter had pulled away. The ground had dropped. Redwater had shrunk beneath them, a pattern of fire and smoke. 2 of the men she had loaded had died on the flight out. The music in the locker room worked its way back into her ears. Riley realized she was still standing with the coin in her hand, the cloth and the photo on the bench. Her throat hurt. She swallowed once hard. She could feel the old sand in her mouth again, even though it was not there. The door opened. A nurse stepped in, stopped when she saw Riley, then quickly pretended she had forgotten something and slipped out again. Some people had that much sense. Riley put the photograph and the cloth back in the bag. The coin did not follow. It stayed in her palm. She closed her fingers around it until the ridges pressed marks into her skin. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and microwave food. The television on the wall played a news channel with the volume turned down. Footage of the storm front off the coast crawled across the bottom of the screen, a ribbon of bright graphics against gray clouds. Riley sat at the corner table, the coin resting on the surface in front of her. Her fingers traced the edges over and over like worry beads. Agent Morales found her there. He did not knock. He closed the door behind him, letting the latch click softly. "You disappeared on us," he said. "You found me anyway," she answered without looking up. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. His tie was askew, his shoulders tense. He glanced at the coin, then back at her face. "I read everything they would let me read," he said. "About Redwater, about what you did that day." Riley gave a short sound that might have been a laugh. "Lots of black bars in those reports." "Enough lines left to get the idea," Morales said. "You moved 9 out under fire, you kept 5 alive who should have been body bags. 2 died in transit, 6 never made it off the tarmac." "Numbers," she said. "It always comes down to numbers in those files." He leaned forward, forearms on the table. "It always comes down to numbers in hospitals, too." She did not argue. "Military analysts went over your choices 8 different ways, Kisei." "Bouh?" "Yeah," he said. "They say the same thing. If you had stayed to dig out Reeve and the others, the second blast would have taken all of you. No lives saved more bodies to count." "I know what they said," she replied. Her voice was quiet but sharper now. "I was in the room when they said it." "And you still left?" It was not a question. She shrugged one shoulder. Uniform did not fit anymore. He watched her for a moment. "Do you know what Reeve did after the dust settled?" he asked. "Opened an investigation," she said. "Signed his name on the line that said I might have abandoned my wounded." "He did," Morales said. "Then he read more reports, talked to survivors, saw the satellite footage they did not show you. He realized that if you had stayed, his name would have been on a different list, the one carved in stone." Riley picked up the coin, turned it between her fingers. "Good for him. He pushed to clear you," Morales said. "By then you had already filed for discharge. In your letter you did not mention Redwater once." "Why would I?" she asked. "I was done." Morales let that sink in. The television showed a looping image of waves hitting a pier. "He is running out of time," Morales said finally. "The doctors think he has hours, not days. They are scared. They keep calling for more scans, like the picture will change if they stare at it long enough." She closed her fist around the coin. The metal bit into her palm. "You brought me in to tell me he will die?" she asked. "I brought you in because he asked for you by name," Morales answered. "Because he trusts you more than people who have been cutting spines for 20 years. Because somewhere in his head there is a map of how that shrapnel got there and you are the one who drew it." Riley looked at the table. Her own reflection stared back at her in the dull laminate. She barely recognized that face either. "I am not going back into an operating room like that," she said. "Not again." "You were just in one," Morales pointed out. "That was different," she said. "That was a bleeding kid in front of me in a machine that would not work. That is what I do." He sat back studying her. "What you do, Yusuki." "Ivapinsu," he repeated. She stood. The chair legs scraped on the linoleum. She slid the coin into the pocket of her scrub pants. "I need to get back to my shift," she said. She left the break room without waiting for a reply. The ICU hallway seemed longer this time. Each step felt heavier, as if the floor were trying to pull her feet down. She told herself she was only walking past Reeves' room on the way to check something else. That lie did not hold long. She stopped outside his glass door. The critical care doctor stood near the bed, conferring in a low voice with a woman in a white coat who wore a neurosurgery badge. Their faces carried the same tightness she recognized from Redwater, the expression of people trying to make sense of a bad set of options. The neurosurgeon noticed her. "You are Monroe, right?" Riley nodded. "I have heard your name more times than I like tonight, sir," the surgeon said. "He will not let us near his back without you in the room. He keeps grabbing at the sheets like he is on some bunker floor." The critical care doctor lifted his shoulders. "We are losing ground. His blood pressure is dropping in small steps. The bleeding is slow but steady. We are chasing it with fluids and packs. It is not enough." Riley watched Reeve. His skin had a waxy sheen now. Each breath seemed to cost him something. His eyes fluttered open. For a second the fog broke. His gaze locked onto her through the haze of painkillers and shock. "Monroe," he rasped. She stepped in without meaning to. "I am here," she said. "You remember Gushun Fisfierd." "Where it went in." You put your hand there. Her throat tightened. Heat rose behind her eyes. That was a long time ago, she said. For me it was this morning, he replied. Feels like it anyway. His hand lifted off the mattress, fingers reaching. She caught it without thinking, her palm against his. His skin was dry and hot. Do not let them guess, he said. You know better than they do. You always did. The monitor ticked off another second, another beat of a heart that was working too hard. Riley stood very still, then she let out a slow breath. Prep an operating room, she said, not taking her eyes off Reeve. Get your vascular and neuro. Get whoever you need. The neurosurgeon blinked. You are agreeing to assist. I am agreeing to tell you where to cut and where not to cut, Riley said. I will not take your place. I will not sign your consents. But if you are going in there, you are not going in blind. The doctor nodded already, reaching for his phone. The neurosurgeon gave her a look that carried both skepticism and relief. You scrub in, the surgeon said. I want you next to me when we open his back. Riley released Reeve's hand slowly. His fingers slid back to the sheet. Keep him alive until we get there, she said. In the scrub room, the water ran hot over her forearms. She scrubbed in measured circles up to the elbows, the way she had been taught long before Mercy Bridge. The smell of the antiseptic soap pulled more fragments from memory. Field tents, makeshift sterilization kits, metal bowls clanging. She dried her arms carefully and let the circulating nurse help her into the gown and gloves. The fabric settled over her like an old, unwanted coat. The operating room was bright and cold. Reeve lay on his side again this time, turned a little more to expose his lower back. Blue drapes framed the field. The bright circle of the overhead lamp turned his skin into a pale landscape marked with pen lines where the surgeon had planned to cut. The neurosurgeon stood at the head of the table. The vascular surgeon took position opposite Riley. The anesthesiologist adjusted the settings on his machine, eyes flicking between numbers. Everyone ready, Vechero? The neurosurgeon asked. Riley looked at the marked lines, then at the scans displayed on the monitor. Your incision is too lateral, she said. The neurosurgeon frowned. Excuse me? You are going to chase scar tissue for an hour before you get close, Riley said. She lifted a gloved hand, stopping just short of touching. He took that shrapnel when he was turned twisting away. The entry is higher and more medial than your marker. You are making this call from memory, the surgeon said. She met his gaze. From the way his back looked when I packed the wound and heard him stop screaming. You want the truth or something that looks good on an anatomy chart? The room went quiet except for the soft hiss of the ventilator. The neurosurgeon held her eyes another moment, then picked up a marker and adjusted the line. Show me, he said. She stepped closer, pointed. Here. You will hit scar first. Under that, the fragment. One piece is lying like a fishhook curved toward the vessel. You cannot pull straight. You have to roll it out. Noted, the vascular surgeon said under his breath. They began. The first cut opened old scar tissue, white and thick. There was surprisingly little fresh blood, just the slow ooze of tissue, remembering what it was to be wounded. The smell of cauterization filled the air, sharp and metallic. Riley watched the layers part, guiding when the surgeons hesitated. Deeper, not there. You feel that grittiness that is not bone. That is embedded metal. The vascular surgeon murmured to the neurosurgeon, their hands moving with practiced coordination. The anesthesiologist called out numbers at intervals. Reeve's pressures dipped, then rose, then dipped again. Then the neurosurgeon stopped. I see it. Under the lights, the fragment gleamed faintly, a dark sliver lodged close to a pulsing vessel. It did look like a fishhook, curved its tip flirting with the artery. Do not pull straight, Riley repeated. Roll. Think of it like unscrewing. She felt the eyes of the room on her, but her focus stayed on that small piece of metal. Her own back seemed to ache in sympathy. The neurosurgeon adjusted his grip hand steady. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, he rotated the fragment, easing it away. A tiny jet of blood spurted, once bright red. The vascular surgeon was already there with a clamp catching it before it could become a flood. The monitor blared for a few stretched seconds as Reeve's blood pressure wobbled. The anesthesiologist adjusted medication voice, climbing a little in urgency. Riley could feel sweat sliding down her spine under the gown. Then the fragment came free. The surgeon held it up for a heartbeat before dropping it into a metal tray. It landed with a small clink. The bleeding slowed. The vessel held. The monitor settled back into a less frantic rhythm. Pack around that, Riley said softly. Do not over-tighten. Let it breathe. They did as she asked. Closing took longer than opening layer by careful layer. When it was done, when the last staple clicked into place and the drapes were pulled back, Reeve looked almost unchanged from before. Only the fresh dressing over his lower back hinted at the war that had just played out under his skin. The team began to peel away one by one, their part finished. The neurosurgeon pulled off his gloves with a snap and looked at Riley. "You were right about the angle," he said, "and about the roll." She did not answer. Her eyes were on Reeves' face. His lashes lay dark against his skin. His chest rose and fell in slow, even pulls. "He is stable for now," the anesthesiologist said. "We will see." Riley stepped back. Her own gloves suddenly felt too tight. In the scrub room, she stripped off the gown and gloves and dropped them into the bin. Her hands were damp, fingers trembling. She braced them on the edge of the sink for a moment, wrists pressed into the cool metal. Morales waited in the hall outside. He straightened when she stepped out, searching her face. "Well?" he asked. "He is alive," she said. "For how long?" he asked. "Well, with the enfant?" he asked. She gave a small shake of her head. "That is not my part anymore." He watched the way her hands shook at her sides. "You went back in," he said, "after everything." "I said I would never cut again," she replied. "I break promises sometimes." She started down the hall before he could answer the overhead lights, casting her shadow long on the floor tiles. Her step steady, even as her fingers still remembered the feel of metal under living tissue. Reeve went to recovery with 2 nurses and a respirator humming at his side. Riley stayed out of the way as they wheeled him past, keeping to the shadows of the corridor. His bed rolled by her, the metal frame squeaking once over a dent in the floor. His face was still slack with anesthesia. If he knew she had been there, it did not show. The critical care doctor caught up to her a few minutes later, his surgical cap pushed back on his head hair flattened to his skull. "Vitals look good," he said. "For now, anyway. Whatever you told them in there, it helped." She gave a small nod. "He needs quiet." "We can do quiet," the doctor said. "It is the one thing we are good at in ICU." He left her there. The hallway felt very long and very bright. Riley made it back to the break room and stared at the coffee pot for a full 30 seconds before realizing she did not actually want coffee. Her hands still felt like they were inside gloves, even though she had taken them off. Word traveled faster than she liked. By the time she returned to the nurses' station in the emergency department, the tide had already turned. Conversation stopped when she approached, then started again a few seconds later at a lower volume. Faces turned away just a little too slowly. Someone had clearly been talking. The charge nurse tried to act normal. She failed. "So," she said, arranging charts that did not need arranging. "Interesting visitors tonight." Riley signed off on a medication order. "It has been a long shift." "Agent Morales was looking for you," the charge nurse added. "He said they are setting something up in the lobby." Riley looked up. "Setting what up?" "A statement," the nurse said. "He mentioned press, cameras, that kind of circus." Riley's pen stilled on the page. "About what?" The nurse gave a helpless little shrug. "About the attack on their witness. About how our ER is very brave and capable and deserves more funding. I did not ask for details." The hospital director appeared at the far end of the hall, walking quickly, jacket flapping. A woman in a blazer with a laminated badge followed, talking into a headset. There was a tightness in his shoulders that Riley recognized. He had been pushed into something. He noticed Riley and headed toward her. "We are holding a press briefing in the atrium," he said. "The FBI wants to address security concerns. Some reporters already got wind of the stabbing." Riley nodded once. That made sense. Federal witness attack leaks. Of course someone would have called a station. The director hesitated. "Agent Morales asked if you would be present." "I have patients," she said. "Your patients are stable," he replied. "He said this concerns you, personally." Riley looked past him toward the lobby where she could already see movement. Tripods, cables, the glare of portable lights. She did not answer. Morales appeared at the edge of the group, speaking with the woman in the blazer. He saw Riley and lifted a hand to wave her over. There was no way to pretend she had not seen him. The atrium had been cleared of visitors. The usual chairs and tables were pushed back against the walls. A small podium stood in front of the reception desk. 2 flags, one American and one bearing the hospital logo, flanked it. Cameramen adjusted their lenses. Microphones from 3 different local stations had been taped together on the podium in a crooked bouquet. Hospital staff lined the upper balcony, leaning on the railing, looking down. The air tasted like nerves and fresh paint. Morales stepped up to the podium first. The bright lights washed some of the exhaustion from his face, but not all of it. "Good evening," he said. "I am Special Agent Carter Morales with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As many of you know, there was an attack tonight on a protected witness in a federal case. He was transported to Mercy Bridge Medical Center in critical condition." Riley stayed at the edge of the crowd next to a potted plant with leaves that needed dusting. She tried to blend into the wall. "The situation is now under control," Morales continued. "Thanks to the swift action of the staff here, the patient is in stable condition in the intensive care unit. We are grateful to the doctors, nurses, and support teams who worked through the night. Flashes popped. The director stood a few feet behind Morales, hands clasped, nodding at appropriate moments. A reporter in a leather jacket spoke up. "Agent, can you comment on the identity of the witness or who might have targeted him?" Morales shook his head. "We are not releasing those details at this time. This briefing is to reassure the public that the facility is safe and that the medical response was exemplary." The word hung in the air, exemplary. Another reporter called out, "We heard a nurse had to step in when equipment failed. Is that true?" Riley tensed. The plant beside her did nothing to make her invisible. Morales glanced in her direction, then faced the cameras. The emergency department encountered mechanical issues under pressure, which can happen in any hospital. A member of the nursing staff acted quickly and decisively to compensate, which directly contributed to saving a life. "Name," someone asked. Morales looked at Riley again. This time he gestured. "Riley," he said loud enough for the room to hear. "Can you come up here for a moment?" She wanted to say no. The words stayed behind her teeth. The director gave her an encouraging look that was more nervous than supportive. Staff on the balcony leaned over the rail. Riley stepped forward, feet heavy. The lights on the podium hit her face. For a second, she had to narrow her eyes against the brightness. The cameras adjusted their focus, glass eyes clicking. "This is Riley Monroe," Morales said. "Many of you know her as a nurse in the emergency department." Riley nodded once at the cameras, short and stiff. She could feel her pulse in her throat again. Morales continued, "What you do not know is that before she worked here, she served as a captain in the United States Navy as a combat medic in a special operations unit." The air in the atrium changed. Reporters straightened. There was a murmur from the balcony. Somewhere behind her, a nurse whispered, "Captain." Riley kept her expression steady. Her mouth felt very dry. "A few years ago at a place called Redwater Airfield, she led a medical evacuation under fire that saved multiple lives," Morales said. "One of those lives was the man who was attacked tonight, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reeve. Tonight, she helped save him again." "Is that true?" a reporter asked. "Were you his medic back then?" Riley spoke into the microphones. "I was part of a team," she said. Her voice sounded flatter than she meant it to. "Nobody does that alone." The reporter pushed. "Why did you leave the Navy and come here instead? That is a big change." Riley looked at the reporter, at his notepad, at his clean hands. "I wanted to work where people walk out of the building afterwards," she said, "most of the time." Some of the staff behind her let out a small laugh that did not carry to the microphones. Morales gave her a brief look, something like gratitude and regret mixed. Another reporter raised her hand. "Captain Monroe, are you going back to the military now that your role in this case is out in the open?" Riley felt the weight of the word captain. It sat on her tongue like something she could not swallow. "It is just Riley," she said, "and no one has asked me to go anywhere." That was not entirely true. The Navy had not called yet, but she could feel their presence on the horizon in the way Morales avoided looking at her when certain questions came up. The press kept throwing questions. Morales fielded most of them, steering the conversation back to security protocols and the ongoing investigation. The hospital director added a few lines about teamwork and gratitude. Through it all, Riley stayed at the podium's edge, feeling more like a prop than a person. Eventually, Morales wrapped it up. "Thank you," he said to the cameras. "That is all we can share for now." The lights powered down. The reporters gathered their gear, already talking about editing and deadlines. Staff drifted away in small clusters. Someone clapped her on the shoulder as they passed, telling her she had done great. It sounded like they were talking about a speech at a school event. Riley slipped out of the atrium as soon as she could. Outside, the wind had picked up. Rain slapped against the glass doors in sudden bursts. The storm the news had been tracking all week was finally reaching the city. The night shift felt longer than usual. The board filled and emptied in waves. Slip and falls from wet sidewalks, minor car accidents, a man who tried to secure lawn furniture in gale-force gusts and lost the fight. The wind howled around the corners of the building, a low, constant roar under everything else. By the time dawn should have lightened the sky, the world outside was a uniform dark gray. Sheets of water drove sideways past the windows. Traffic lights swung on their cables. In the nurses' station, the television that usually played cartoons for the pediatric waiting area now showed a live shot from the harbor. Waves shoved themselves against the seawall. The reporter on screen shouted into the microphone while her raincoat snapped around her. "They are saying it is a Category 4 offshore," the charge nurse said, watching. "If it comes any closer, we will get the tail." "We are already getting it," Riley said. The power flickered once. Monitors blinked. People froze for a breath, then relaxed when everything steadied again. "Backup systems are tested, right?" a resident asked, only half joking. "They are supposed to be," someone answered. The second flicker lasted longer. For 3 seconds, the ER dropped into a different world. Sounds became muffled. The air itself seemed to hesitate. Then the overhead lights came back. Machines rebooted. A heartbeat later, the generators kicked in with a low rumble felt more than heard. The overhead paging system crackled. The administrator on call announced that the hospital was now officially on emergency power. Non-essential areas were being closed. All elective procedures were canceled. Rain hammered the roof. The building shuddered just enough to make everyone look up. The ER stayed busy. Broken glass cuts, hypothermia from people who had slept under bridges and tried to outrun the wind. A police officer with a dislocated shoulder after directing traffic too close to a falling tree. The usual chaos with more water. Riley moved from bed to bed, her feet sliding a little on damp patches that the housekeeping staff could not keep up with. Her body knew the rhythm even if her mind still stuck on Reeve down the hall and the cameras in her face in the lobby. Then the lights went out completely. There was no flicker this time. No warning. 1 second the monitors were beeping and the fluorescent tubes hummed. The next, everything cut to black. The sound that followed was raw. Machines winding down, voices rising. Someone dropped a metal tray. It hit the floor with a crash that sounded louder than it should have. For a heartbeat, Riley could not see her own hands. Then the red glow of the emergency exit signs bloomed along the walls. The faint light from them painted long shadows. Battery-powered strips in the floors lit up in a soft line marking pathways. Somewhere a portable monitor beeped on its own backup supply. The generator failed, the charge nurse said. Her voice had that stretched-thin quality that came with terror. Riley could feel her own pulse kick up, but she did not let it show. "Grab flashlights," she said. "Check every room. No one is alone with a critical patient." Nurses lunged for the drawers where flashlights and headlamps were stored. Beams cut through the dark, jerking at first, then settling. The overhead speaker crackled again, then died. Whatever message administration had been about to send did not make it out. "This is bad," a resident muttered. "Then we are going to be good," Riley said. She moved into the main treatment area. The machines that breathed for people had fallen silent. Patients who had been sedated, unaware of the storm, began to stir as their bodies realized something was wrong. "Look at me," Riley said to the staff, raising her voice so it carried but did not scream. "We have airbags for every vented patient. We have manual blood pressure cuffs. We have hands. Use them." A young nurse in her first year swallowed hard. "What if we cannot keep up?" "Then we go faster," Riley answered. "You on vents, you on vitals, pair up, no one works alone." They split under her words, moving with more purpose, less panic. The charge nurse pulled a cart into the center of the room and stacked it with equipment that did not need power. Stethoscopes, gauze, portable suction pumps with hand cranks. Riley grabbed an ambu bag and fitted it to the end of a patient's endotracheal tube. She squeezed the bag, feeling the resistance, counting under her breath to keep a rhythm. "In here," she counted. 2-3, out 2-3. A nurse took over, matching her pace. "Good," Riley said. "Do not stop until someone taps you out." The storm roared outside. Inside, the soundtrack became a different kind of noise. The wheeze of manual ventilations. The rip of tape. The rustle of gowns. The quiet curses of people working past fear. In ICU, it would be worse. More machines, more lines, more things that could fail. Riley thought of Reeve, of the mending in his back that had barely had time to set. She thought of the pumps that were keeping his blood pressure steady. She turned to Morales, who had appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, its screen a small square of light in the dark. "How bad is it out there?" she asked. "City grid is hit hard," she said. "Flooded substations. They are trying to reroute, but no one is giving times." He looked around the ER at nurses bagging patients and doctors squinting at charts with flashlights clamped between their teeth. "What do you need?" he asked. "People," she said. "Strong arms. Anyone who can follow orders and is not about to faint at the sight of blood." He slid the phone into his pocket. "I can find that." Within minutes, he was back with a few off-duty officers who had taken refuge in the hospital, a security guard from the lobby, even a janitor who had seen enough accidents to know how to keep his head. Riley assigned them spots. One per bed to squeeze bags, to hold lights, to flag down a nurse if something changed. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched and folded back on themselves. Riley moved through the rooms, checking pulses, adjusting arm positions so muscles would not cramp, trading out exhausted staff for fresher ones. Sweat prickled at her hairline. The flashlight beam from her headlamp left ghost circles in her vision. The worst sounds were the ones that did not come. No long flat lines on monitors because most of them were dark. No alarm tones. She learned to listen to different cues. The hitch in a patient's breath. The change in the sound of air moving through a bag. the wind outside rising and falling like a giant creature restless in its sleep. In ICU, she found Reeve with a nurse and a respiratory therapist working double time. His blood pressure had dipped but held. The manual rhythm of the ambu bag matched the beat in her own chest. "You good here?" she asked. The therapist nodded, jaw clenched. "As long as my hands hold out." "They will," she said. She placed her hand briefly over his on the bag, sharing the weight for a moment. "Switch every 15 minutes. Do not be a hero." He snorted. Too late for that. Lightning flashed outside, brightening the room for a heartbeat. Thunder rolled in right after shaking the glass. They kept going. When the power came back, it felt almost rude. The lights snapped on harsh and white. Machines rebooted screens flashing through their startup sequences. The sudden noise of electronics returning to life crashed over the quieter human sounds. Someone cheered a ragged sound that turned into more voices. A nurse laughed, part hysterical, part relief. The generators had come back or the grid had stabilized. It did not matter which. Riley blinked against the light. Her pupils shrank, her eyes stung. She turned off her headlamp and pulled it away. "Check everybody," she said. "Make sure machines are picking up where you left off. Do not trust them until you see numbers that make sense." Staff moved from patient to patient, reconnecting ventilators, syncing drips, letting their tired hands rest for a moment at their sides. In ICU, the ventilator took over for the therapist, who peeled his fingers from the ambu bag with a wince. Reeves' monitor showed a heart rate that was higher than before but steady. The critical care doctor appeared at Riley's shoulder. "We did not lose anyone," he said. He sounded surprised. Riley looked around the unit, faces drawn pale, streaked with sweat but standing, patients breathing, lines running. "Good," she said. Her knees felt loose beneath her. She walked out into the corridor and found a quiet stretch of wall. She slid down until she was sitting on the floor, scrubs wrinkling back pressed to the cool surface. Her hands lay open on her thighs. The muscles in her arms twitched in little aftershocks. She watched them fascinated and mildly annoyed. Morales came to stand nearby. He did not speak at first. He just stood there breathing hard shirt damp at the collar. "I thought I had seen people under pressure before," he said finally. "Turns out I had not." She let her head rest against the wall, eyes half closed. "Everyone had a job," she said. "That is all." "Not everyone knew what theirs was," he replied, "until you told them." He crouched so he was closer to her level. "Were you scared?" he asked. "Of course," she said. She looked at him, and for a moment the tiredness dropped. "Fear keeps you awake." She flexed her fingers once testing them, then let them settle again. "Anyway," she added, "nobody died tonight." The words came out matter-of-fact, but there was a small thread of something else in them. Something like relief that felt almost dangerous to admit. Morales nodded. "I'm going to tell Reeve that when he wakes up. He likes that kind of statistic." Riley did not answer. She closed her eyes fully this time, just for a moment, letting the sounds of the hospital in its new, humming normal wash over her. The storm left the city in pieces. By midday, the rain had thinned to a steady drizzle that turned the streets into a patchwork of puddles and broken branches. The hospital smelled like wet coats and tired people. News vans appeared first. Satellite dishes on their roofs tilted toward the sky, chasing a signal through damp air. Reporters did stand-ups outside the main entrance, hair lacquered into submission, talking into microphones about heroes, power grids, and miracle saves. Inside, someone left the television on in the staff break room. Clips from the press conference played on a loop. Riley caught a glimpse of her own face on the screen once. The camera angle was not flattering. The caption at the bottom read, "Nurse Captain saves witness twice." She turned the volume down until their mouths moved without sound. The next day, a small pile of mail appeared at the nurse's station. Cards mostly. Some had been addressed vaguely to the staff of Mercy Bridge and ended up in a communal basket. One was addressed by hand. Captain Riley Monroe, Co-Mercy Bridge Medical Center. The charge nurse picked it up, eyebrows raised. "When did you get promoted again, Miss Tamas?" Riley took the envelope. The paper was cheap, the ink slightly smeared as if written in a hurry or with a pen that did not quite cooperate. The return address was a town she did not know in a state she had never visited. She weighed the envelope in her hand. It was light. In the break room, the window showed a gray afternoon. The parking lot was half full of cars splashed with mud. She sat at the corner table, the same spot where Morales had found her before. The flap opened easily. Inside there was no official letterhead, just a folded sheet of lined paper covered in neat handwriting. "Dear Captain Monroe, you do not know us. We are the families of the 6 men and women who did not come home from Redwater Airfield. The ones they call the Redwater 6 in the news when they remember to mention them. We saw a story yesterday about you. They said your name. They showed your face. They said you were the medic who got some of them on the helicopter, and that you are now a nurse in a city we have never been to. We thought you should hear from us. We do not blame you. We know what the report said. We know you had to choose who went up and who stayed. We know they died on a piece of hot concrete while you were in the air. You gave them a chance. You gave us bodies to bring home, flags to fold, names to carve. We got to stand by caskets. We got to see uniforms laid out with care. Some people never get that. Our sons and daughters died doing what they chose. They died with someone trying to save them. We have heard from the ones who lived. They say you never stopped moving that day. They say you stayed until the last possible second. They say you carried them when their legs would not work and told them they would be fine when it was clear that they might not be. You gave them more time than they would have had without you. We wanted you to know we are grateful. You were there. We were not. We have to live with that. You have to live with something else. Please do not carry more than what is yours. Thank you for what you did. Signed, the families of the Redwater Six. The signatures filled the bottom half of the page, different handwriting, different pressures. One line had a small doodle of a star next to a name the kind a child might draw. Riley read the letter twice. The words did not get easier the second time. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard and the letters came back into focus. She realized she was holding her breath and let it go slowly. The challenge coin in her pocket felt suddenly present. She took it out and set it beside the letter. The metal and the paper touched along one edge. Her chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. Whatever dam she had built inside herself to keep Redwater contained shifted a crack running down the middle. She folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope, then tucked both into the canvas bag with the photograph and the strip of cloth. It felt like putting something back where it belonged, even if that place was still lined with pain. Reeve was awake the next time she went to ICU. He lay propped up slightly, lines running into his arms. Oxygen tube moved out of his nose and replaced with a small cannula. His color was better, though, still too pale. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes had deepened. He was watching the news on the wall-mounted television with a look that combined amusement and irritation. His face appeared there for a moment, a grainy photo from some ceremony years ago. Then a shot of the hospital, then a shot of Riley at the podium. She stepped into the room. He caught the movement in the corner of his eye and reached for the remote, clicking the television off. Those people love the sound of their own voices, he said. His own voice was rough but stronger than she had heard it in days. You gave them plenty to talk about, she replied. He smiled, a small twist of his mouth. And you gave them the ending they wanted. She came closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. His chart hung where she could see it with a glance. Vital stable. Pain managed. No sign of new bleeding. How are you feeling? She asked. Like someone took a piece of shrapnel out of my spine, he said. And like I owe you an apology. She met his eyes. They were the same color she remembered, even if the skin around them had changed. He took a breath that seemed to cost him. I was wrong, he said. About Redwater, about you. I signed off on an investigation I should have fought harder against. I let people who were not there tell the story. You were there, she said. I was there for part of it, he replied. Pinned under a frame yelling at you to leave me. After that I saw things through fog and morphine. You saw the whole picture. He shifted, grimaced, adjusted his shoulders on the pillow. I read the full analyses later, he said, Ed. He said, saw the maps, the blast patterns. If you had stayed, if you had tried to drag me out, that second explosion would have turned you into dust. You and the ones you sent to the helicopter. You know this. I know it here, she said, tapping her temple. Not as much here. She laid her hand flat against her chest for a moment. The gesture felt strange but honest. Reeve nodded. Head logic and heart logic are not the same currency. He studied her. Why did you not fight the findings? He asked. Why did you just walk away? She pulled in a breath through her nose, let it out slowly. To fight, I would have had to lie on a table like this and let them cut into that day over and over, Chikaim, she said. I did not have the strength for that. Easier to pack it up, sign the papers, and disappear. You did not disappear very well, he said, glancing around at the hospital room. I found you eventually. She huffed a quiet half laugh. I was hoping you would be too busy to notice. He was quiet for a moment. When Morales told me you were here, he said I thought he was joking. Then I thought maybe I had been carrying that metal in my back so long it had crawled into my brain. You always did have questionable humor, she said. His mouth twitched again. You saved me twice, he said. Once when you put me last on that helicopter and made sure I still got on. Once when you pulled that piece of hell out of my spine, I wanted you to hear me say that. She looked down at her hands. They lay loose at her sides, the skin still showing faint marks from hours in gloves. I was doing my job, she said. So was I when I opened that investigation, he replied. It does not mean I did not hurt you with it. He shifted again, winced, settled. I recommended you for a commendation after Redwater, he said. The Navy Cross. The paperwork was still moving when your discharge went through. The two trains collided and everything went into a drawer. She shook her head. I do not want a medal. You are getting one anyway, Psue, he said. At least on paper. They feel better when they have boxes checked. She let it sit. The idea of a piece of ribbon and metal with her name on it did not land properly. It floated somewhere above her head, out of reach. Do they know I will not show up to pin it on my chest? She asked. They know you might not, he said. They still want to make the record match the truth. There was a knock at the glass. Morales stood outside the room, a folder under his arm, a paper cup of coffee in his free hand. He raised his eyebrows as if asking permission. Riley tilted her head toward the door. Looks like the rest of the world is here, she said. Reeves sighed. Send him in, before he starts talking through the glass. Morales entered, closed the door gently behind him. You are looking less like a crime scene, he said to Reeve. That is because I cannot see my own back, Reeve answered. Morales shifted his attention to Riley. He held out the folder. This came from the Department of the Navy, he said, by way of a very persistent liaison officer. She did not take it right away. What is it? A formal notice that they would like to restore your rank, Morales said, and a recommendation that you accept a position as a training advisor for combat medical operations. She looked at the folder as if it might bite. They have good timing, she said. Wait until after the storm and the cameras. Morales shrugged. They watch the same news everyone else does. Reeve watched her. You would be good at it, he said. Teaching others, keeping them alive before they ever see a place like Redwater. She walked to the window, looked out at the wet city. The sky was starting to clear in patches, thin light pushing through. I am good at this, she said quietly. Here, with these people. Morales leaned against the wall near the bed. The Navy is not the only one asking, he said. The Bureau could use someone who knows how to plug holes in bad situations. You would not have to carry a gun. Just teach us how not to bleed out before the ambulance arrives. She glanced back at him. You want me to train agents? We like to keep the ones we hire breathing, he said. It helps with paperwork. Reeves smiled at that, then grimaced as the movement tugged at his stitches. Riley did not answer right away. The idea of returning to government payroll made her shoulders tighten. What if I do not want their uniforms? She said. Any of them. I barely tolerate these scrubs. You do not need a uniform to teach, Reeves said. You need a room equipment and people who are willing to listen. Morales straightened, picking up on something in her tone. What are you thinking? He asked. Riley watched a drop of water slide down the glass, trailing a thin path. There are a lot of nurses who end up in situations that feel like war zones, she said. ER nurses, trauma nurses, medics, trying to retrain veterans who want to work in hospitals but do not know how to translate what they know. She turned back to them. They do not need medals. They need skills, and a place to learn how to make decisions when everything goes sideways. Reeve nodded slowly. A training program. Field-based, she said. Hands-on, no dress uniforms, no parades. Morales tilted his head. You have a name for this program in your pocket already, do you? Field Mercy, she said. The words felt simple in her mouth. Teach people how to bring order to chaos, how to carry what they see without breaking. Reeves' eyes softened. You want to build that. I want to see fewer faces like the ones we saw at Redwater, she replied. On both sides of the gurney. Morales opened the folder and slid an envelope out. The Navy SEAL stared up at them in blue. They propose naming a new facility after you, he said. The Captain Riley Monroe Center for Combat Medicine. She snorted quietly. That is a mouthful. They thought you would say something like that, Morales said. They seemed prepared to argue. I do not want my name on a building, she said. If they need a name, they already have 6. Reeve knew before she said it. Redwater 6, he murmured. Oh, I murmured. She nodded. The Redwater 6 Memorial Institute, she said. They are the ones who did not get to come home. If anyone should have their names on stone, it is them. Morales considered it. You would be the director. Honorary, she said, if that makes them feel better. Reeves smiled again. You might get your way. They have been looking for something that sounds properly solemn. That does it. Morales slipped the envelope back into the folder. I will take that upstairs, Faya, he said. See how many admirals it takes to agree to one line of text. Riley did not reach for the folder. She looked at Reeve instead. You sure this is what you want? She asked. He met her gaze. I want a world where people like you train the next ones, he said, so that when the worst days come, they are standing in the right place with their hands steady. Her hands at the moment were not entirely steady. She tucked them into the pockets of her lab coat to hide the faint tremor. "I will think about it," she said. Reeve nodded, thinking as aloud. Morales watched them both, understanding something in the silence that followed. He tapped the folder lightly with his fingers. "I will let them know you are considering," he said. "That will make them nervous, which is healthy." He moved toward the door. "Riley," he added just before he opened it, "you get to choose this time. Not a blast, not a bad call. You." She did not reply. The coin in her pocket warmed under her hand. 3 years later, the building did not look like much from the street. It had been a warehouse once. The bricks still showed in places where the new paint had not bothered to hide them. A simple sign over the glass doors read, "Redwater 6 Memorial Institute, Field Mercy Training Center." On clear days, sunlight hit the letters just right so they seemed brighter than the wall behind them. Today the light was softer, late afternoon, slipping toward the evening sky streaked with orange and blue. Inside, the air smelled like rubber coffee and the faint chemical tang of simulated blood. Mannequins lay on stretchers in various states of imagined distress. Tourniquets wrapped plastic limbs. Monitors beeped quietly set to random patterns. Riley walked between groups of students. They wore scrubs jeans uniforms. Some had the stiff posture of active duty. Others had the tired shoulders of nurses who had already worked a few too many night shifts. A few had both. "Stop." "Oh, Mamnan," she said to one young woman who was pressing gauze into a fake wound with careful fingers. "You are thinking too much." The woman froze. "I do not want to hurt him." "It is a mannequin," Riley said. "And real arteries do not care how gentle you are. They care if you stop the bleeding." She stepped closer, took the student's hands, and pressed them down with more force. The plastic gave under their combined weight. "Feel that," Riley said. "That density. That is what you are looking for. You are buying time." The student nodded, focusing. Her forehead glistened with a thin line of sweat that had nothing to do with temperature. "Again," Riley said, "until your hands know without your head explaining it." On the far wall, a metal plaque caught the light. 6 names were engraved there, rank and last assignment. Someone had tucked a small bouquet of dried flowers into the frame. Beside the plaque behind glass sat a single challenge coin dark with age, the insignia worn smooth in places. Riley's pocket was empty. Between sessions, she stood near the plaque for a moment. Her hand rose almost on its own and brushed the glass. The metal under it did not move. Footsteps approached from behind. "Captain," a voice said, then hesitated. "Sorry, Riley." She turned. One of the older students, a paramedic who had seen more car wrecks than she wanted to count, stood there with a notebook in hand. "I have a question, Chagis," the woman said. "From earlier, when we were talking about triage." Riley nodded. "Ask." "You said there are days when you do everything right and someone still dies," the woman said. "How do you go home after that? How do you walk into a place like this and teach like it did not happen?" Riley looked past her for a second through the open doors of the training bay, where another group practiced dragging a weighted dummy onto a stretcher. Their grunts mixed with the scrape of metal on concrete. "It happened, Chef," she said. "You do not pretend it did not. You remember their faces. You remember what you did and what you would change if anything." She paused. "Then you use that when you are standing over the next person," she added. "You let it make your hands sharper, not softer. That is how you carry them." The paramedic nodded slowly, absorbing that. "So you do not forget them." "You should not," Riley said. "Forgetting is not the goal." The woman smiled, small but real. "Thank you." She went back to her group. Riley stayed by the plaque a few seconds longer, then turned as the front door opened. A young woman in dress blues stood uncertainly in the entryway, cover tucked under one arm. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. The lines of her uniform were sharp, creases precise. She carried a small envelope and a folded paper bag. The receptionist spoke with her in a low voice, then pointed toward Riley. The young woman walked over, the boots clicking lightly on the polished floor. She came to attention without being asked and saluted. "Ma'am," she said, "Ensign Grace Mitchell, United States Navy. I hope this is not a bad time." Riley returned the salute automatically, emotion her muscles had never quite forgotten. "It is a busy time," she said. "But not a bad one. What can I do for you, Ensign?" Grace held out the envelope first. "My brother asked me to bring you something," she said. He would have come himself, but he has a little league game tonight, and he promised his kids he would not miss it. Riley took the envelope. The name on the corner made her chest tighten. Corporal James Mitchell. The photo inside showed a man standing in a backyard, one arm around a woman, the other around a boy who looked about 8. A little girl perched on his shoulders, hair sticking up in pigtails as if she had been in motion when the picture was taken. There was a grill behind them, smoke rising the sunlight, catching the edges of their faces. On the back, written in block letters that tried to be neat, was a single line. To Captain Monroe. Thank you for my tomorrow. James Riley closed her eyes for a moment. She could see him as he had been at Redwater Younger Blood, on his uniform fingers wrapped around her sleeve as the helicopter lifted. He had asked if he was going to die. She had lied. She opened her eyes again. The man in the photo smiled back alive and solid. He talks about you a lot, Grace said. About the medic who kept talking to him on the flight out. Said you swore at him until he stayed awake. Riley felt a small tug at the corner of her mouth. He would not stop asking if he still had both legs. I needed him conscious enough to hear the answer. Grace laughed softly. He says he would not have joined the Navy if it was not for you. Joined medical instead of infantry because of how you made that day look. Hard, but not hopeless. She glanced around the training bay. When I had the chance to pick a specialty, she said, I asked for medical. I asked for this city. I wanted to see if you were real. Riley looked at her, taking in the uniform, the clear eyes, the steadiness in her stance. Disappointed, why? She asked. Grace shook her head. No, ma'am. Kind of terrified, but not disappointed. She gestured toward the students. I cannot stay long. I just wanted to tell you there are people walking around who only got to grow old because of what you did. And some of us are trying to be like that too. Riley did not trust her voice right away. She let silence sit between them until it felt less sharp. Tell your brother he owes his kids an extra ice cream, she said finally. On me. Grace smiled. I will. Thank you for seeing me. She left as neatly as she had arrived, the door closing softly behind her, letting in a rectangle of cooler air, and then shutting it out again. Riley stood in the entrance for a moment, the photo in her hand. Through the glass, the sky had deepened colors leaning toward purple. The parking lot lights blinked on, one by one small circles of brightness in the growing dusk. Behind her, an instructor called for one last drill. Students moved into position, hands finding equipment voices low but focused. Riley walked back toward them. She paused once more at the plaque, sliding the photograph into a narrow space at the edge of the frame where it would not cover any names but would still be there. James Mitchell's smiling face joined the engraved ones in quiet company. In the training bay, a young nurse was fumbling with a tourniquet, twisting it too far from the wound. The mannequin's leg looked more strangled than treated. Riley stepped up beside her. Here, she said, reaching for the nurse's hands. Closer to the injury. Feel the pulse, then make it disappear. The nurse nodded, swallowing. Riley guided her fingers firm and sure. The overhead lights buzzed softly. Outside, the last of the sun brushed the windows. Riley's hand stayed steady. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.